The polio virus has plagued the modern world for many centuries. Major epidemics of polio have erupted in the United States since 1894. They have claimed the lives of many and left others with life-changing debilitations. Today, however, it is a completely different story. In this previous year, there were 0 reported cases of polio in the United States and under 100 cases worldwide. We can partially attribute this landmark statistic to a scientist named Jonas Salk. Polio is a condition caused by the polio virus. It causes deformities in the legs and can lead to paralysis. Polio may have been present in the world since ancient times. An Egyptian carving dating back to the 1400s BC depicts a man with a deformed leg. This deformity is a common symptom of polio. Although polio has existed for many centuries, it was not discovered as a truly contagious disease until the 20th century. A major breakthrough took place in the early 1900s when Swedish scientist Ivar Wickman suggested that polio is a contagious disease that can spread from person to person, and that cases of polio can be found in patients who did not show obvious symptoms. These cases came to be known as abortive. One of the first large polio outbreaks to occur in the United States began in New York in 1916, with the increased number of infections surfacing in June. The epidemic was centered in Brooklyn and claimed more than 6,000 lives in New York City alone, leaving thousands more paralyzed. With the problem beginning to grow out of control, the search for a vaccine began. The man to make this revolutionary vaccine would not begin working on his greatest accomplishment until 1947. He was born Jonas Edward Salk on October 18, 1914, in Harlem, New York, to parents Daniel and Dora Salk. Salk's parents were both Jewish immigrants. He was the oldest of their 3 sons. His father was a garment worker. He worked to design lace collars and cuffs. Salk's mother encouraged Jonas to pursue an academic career. At the age of 12, Salk began to attend Townsend Harris High School, and had graduated when he was 15 years old. Salk didn't often participate in sports, but he was an exceptional student. He was known to be an extremely hard worker and to read whatever he could get his hands on. After graduating, he attended the College of the City of New York with the intent to become a lawyer. He was the first member of his family to attend college. During his years there, he took a few science classes. These classes intrigued him greatly. This led him to find law boring and encouraged him to explore the entirely different world of science. In 1934, he entered medical school at the College of Medicine of New York University. Jonas Salk received his MD in 1939. Shortly after, he married Donna Lindsay, a psychology major who is currently employed as a social worker. The couple would later go on to have 3 sons, Peter, Daryl, and Jonathan. Salk then began a 2-year internship at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. After completing his internship, he received a job at the University of Michigan. There, he studied the influenza virus with a former mentor, Dr. Francis Jr. This research would prove pivotal in helping Salk create the vaccine for the polio virus. In 1947, Jonas Salk began to work at the University of Pittsburgh. He was the new head of the Virus Research Lab. His endeavors were being funded by the National Foundation of Infantile Paralysis, which we now know as the March of Dimes Birth Defects Foundation. Salk began his research of the polio virus by sorting 125 strains of it. He discovered that there were 3 basic types of the virus. He knew that in order to cure polio, he would need a vaccine that could cure all 3 types. The problem was, manufacturing the polio virus was very difficult. The lack of virus strains made it almost impossible to study, and almost halted research altogether. That is, until 1948, when a group of researchers from Harvard University, J. F. Enders, T. H. Weller, and F. C. Robbins, discovered a way of growing polio on scraps of tissue, without having an entire organism intact. This allowed viruses like polio to be mass-produced. Production of poliovirus would be needed to provide the vaccine in large quantities. This newly developed method of growing polio jump-started Salk's attempt at creating a vaccine. With the new supply of polio, Salk discovered he was able to kill the virus but still leave enough intact that would trigger the body's response using formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is a naturally occurring organic compound that takes the form of a colorless, gaseous substance. At the time, this method of creating vaccines was usually avoided as most scientists believed a dead strain of the virus still had potential to infect someone. The first testing for this new vaccine was conducted on July 2, 1952. A refined version of the vaccine was administered to children who had previously contracted polio and had recovered from it. The children's bodies started producing antibodies right away to fight polio. After the discovery of an effective polio vaccine was announced, people all over the country raced to inoculate themselves and their children. A plan for the distribution of the vaccine for children throughout Florida was released in September of 1955. This project contained $564,000 for 700,000 doses of the vaccine. The funding was provided by the State Board of Health rather than the federal government. About 10% of the vaccines would be provided to public drugstores. Other states came to similar proposals about financial aid for polio vaccine. The Bill S-2501 was introduced in order to allow federal grants to states to aid with the cost of the polio vaccine. This bill was introduced to Congress but died on the Senate floor. The increasingly available vaccine steadily reduced the occurrence of polio epidemics. In 1955, there were 28,985 cases of polio reported in the US, and just 2 years later, in 1957, only 5,894 cases were reported. Due to the extremely beneficial result of the vaccine, Salk was given much recognition for his accomplishment and became a well-known public figure. Despite the great importance of Jonas Salk's polio vaccine, Salk never received a Nobel Prize for his part in the creation of the vaccine. Although he received a nomination in both 1955 and 56, he was never awarded the prize. The Nobel archives reveal that this is partially due to Dr. Sven Gard, a professor of virology at the Karolinska Institute. He wrote, "Salk has not, in the development of his methods, introduced anything that is principally new, but only exploited discoveries made by others." Dr. Gard believed that Salk had only stolen other scientists' ideas, such as growing the virus on scraps of tissue and killing the virus to create a vaccine. Dr. Gard's criticisms may seem fair to some, yet others offer a different perspective on Salk's accomplishment. They believe that the vaccine was not a result of one man stealing and exploiting others' hard work, but the product of an exchange of ideas between many individuals. Jonas Salk never patented the polio vaccine. He wished for people to be vaccinated so that they would be safe from the harsh effects of polio, rather than monopolizing creation of the vaccine and making a fortune for himself. This idea is famously illustrated in a 1955 interview that took place at Duke University between Edward R. Murrow and Jonas Salk. In this interview, Murrow asks Jonas Salk who owns the patent to the polio vaccine. Salk responds, "Well, the people, I would say. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?" The nation's first encounter with large polio outbreaks produced detrimental losses of freedom and dignity for victims of the disease. The nation in peril quickly responded to a vastly growing trend of epidemics. The widely recognized image of a president crippled by polio raised awareness to citizens who urgently called for a vaccine. The country joined together, fearing for its children and hoping to find a cure. Donations to the March of Dimes reached record numbers. Although these acts highlighted the good intentions of humanity, the effort would have been in vain if not for the tireless work of the scientists who eventually created the vaccine.